would show up.
Hey guys, kinggath here, and in this guide we're going to discuss faction decorations. So faction decorations are a way to dynamically decorate a settlement in a way that kind of gives you flavor for that particular faction. So for some of the factions, this works great, like super mutants, as you can see, things like the meat bags or these meat totems. Like, it makes sense for those to just kind of be scattered around haphazardly. I feel like the same thing can be said about the raiders, where you've got the dead bodies or the pikes and the little fences, or tents rather. Those all make sense to just be scattered around. And then some of the other factions doesn't work quite as well with. They're a little more limited on what can be scattered around randomly. So not all faction packs have these decorations, but I wanted to talk about how you can use them, how you can remove them, and how they generally work. So the way that it generally works, there are 3 different ways you could run into these. So the first up that many of you will run into is if you're using the war options on a new save and you have faction packs installed and a faction takes over a settlement and you go into that settlement, you'll find that those faction decorations are scattered around. The second way you might run into these is if you had faction pack decorations enabled, which they are by default, and the faction pack had them configured, then after you establish an outpost or vassal, the next time you come back to that place after you established it, you'll find that these are scattered all over the place. And that second method we're going to come back to, because that is frequently a problem for people. The third method is that something that was just added in the latest Sim Settlements patch 4.2.4. You can actually do it manually through the City Planner's Desk. I'm going to show that now, just to make sure, in case you didn't watch that patch notes video, you know about this. But there's this faction decoration section here, and you can hit spawn decorations, and that will actually spawn all those the same way as if you just conquered it. So you can actually use that in any settlement. It doesn't have to be in an outpost and vassal, but that is how that works. In there, you'll also notice that there was a remove decorations, so you can actually remove those. So going back to point 2, I said that occasionally you can run into problems with those, and this is where remove decorations might be useful. So there are 2 potential problems you could run into. One is if you don't like the way the faction pack author designed those decorations, so maybe you don't agree with some of them, you might want to just get rid of them in bulk. And then the other thing that can happen, I guess, is there's 2 things that can happen, and you're seeing one of them right now, is that some of them get put in awkward places. And another is you sometimes will find them just floating, and that's the biggest problem I find, is that for some people's computers, it cannot calculate ground positions quickly enough, and you end up with items just floating all over the place. So the way this works under the hood is that Conqueror calculates a grid across your settlement, and slightly outside of the border too, as you can see. With those ones in the water there. It kind of puts a grid over the settlement in as best a pattern as it can, and it tries to keep it just within, or rather just over the border, so it's not going too much into other parts of the world. And then it will place items across that grid at every intersecting point, so that it gets a nice little a nice distribution of them. And then it randomizes that distribution a little bit so that it's not a perfect grid, so it doesn't look too uniform. And then finally, it moves them to the nav mesh. So this is where the issue comes in. The nav mesh is only available while you're in that settlement. So a lot of times what will happen is people will go into a settlement, they'll conquer it, and then they will quickly leave and go do something else. Well, while that grid is being calculated and the positioning is being determined, it can, if that nav mesh is unloaded because you left the area, it can't finish the calculation correctly, and so all it can do is finish creating the grid. Now I do have it set to try and stop it once it gets going if it detects that the area is left, but it is done on a multi-threaded system, so that causes problems because the only way multi-threading works good in Fallout 4, and if you don't care about all this technical mumbo jumbo, just tune yourself out. I'll let you know when I'm done. Maybe I'll snap when I'm done talking about it. But the way multi-threading works in this game engine is it's only really effective if you leave each thread completely independent of its parent. As soon as you talk back to where it came from, you basically just eliminate all the benefits of multi-threading in Papyrus. So the way I have to do it is each of these calls has to be completely independent. It can never check back in, and so it can be very difficult, if not impossible, to terminate a bunch of multi-threading once you get get it started. So usually if a player leaves, it's usually too late to stop those grid from spawning. So that's why you'll see those floating. All right, boom, snap, technical mumbo jumbo over. So there are a couple things you can do about decorations if you're finding them floating. First off, you could just remove them with that option I just showed you, and then turn off in your settings. So again, anytime I show you guys something in MCM, this is always available in the Sim Settlement City Manager holotape as well. But if you go into decorations here, you can turn off faction decorating, and it will no longer happen automatically. And then you could just manually run it from the city planner's desk in each of your outposts and vassals, as opposed to letting it happen automatically. Another thing you can do is that in the faction pack or the faction leaders toolkit, where I explain how to do faction decorations, I recommend that they set them up so that they have scrap records, which means you'll be able to scrap them. And often people put full construction records in, which means you can actually pick them up and move them so that you can just put them down on the ground. So you should have an option of scrapping, moving, or just full scrapping them with this. Now, the reason that they do end up, why you might leave and not realize that this is happening. So I just gave you a point of, if you're going to use this system right here, this desk method to force them, stick around and wait till it finishes, because you'll be able to prevent that floating issue. But what's happening in a way that prevents, or that causes this more commonly than I would like, is that you don't even know that it's happening when it's happening. So generally when you conquer a settlement, the idea was, while you're out doing other things, your soldiers are the ones putting down these decorations. So when you come back, they're all revealed. So they start hidden, and then they get revealed the next time you return. And that was done for immersion's sake, because it felt way cooler to me to come back and feel like my soldiers were all busy doing something while I was gone, and made the place have that flavor. So that's how those faction decorations work from a technical standpoint, why you might run into some of those issues. So like I said, you can turn off that setting, so you can make it so decorations aren't applied automatically, and you can manually trigger those decorations through a city planner's desk, not a war planner's desk. The other part of faction decorations is the skins. So this is another thing that will happen automatically, but you can force it from the city planner's desk. The faction skins are related to the plot buildings. So for at least the raiders that are included with Jammer's Gang's quest line. So if you're doing the quests in Conqueror, if you're doing that quest line, we have a bunch of skins designed for most of the vanilla Sim Settlements buildings. So there's 11 houses and 6 shops and a couple of others that we have raider themed versions of. So we didn't do it for the full Industrial Revolution suite, but we did it for all the ones that are shipped with the mod originally. So if a player only had the base Sim Settlements and Conqueror, all of the building plans they have could end up with raider skins. The one faction pack I'm aware of that has followed suit is the Adam's Glory. They also have provided skins for their faction, but it's one of those options that's available. But what's cool about that system is it's actually not limited to the faction packs. Anybody at all could easily design skins coded to a faction, and Conqueror will look at both. So any of them that are coded to a faction, if they're not included with the faction pack, could still get used when you select that faction pack as an option. So if you're interested in adding more support for the skin and decoration system, you can actually add more to this system without even having made your own faction pack. If you want to learn how to do that, check out the Builder's Toolkit and the Faction Leaders Toolkit. Between the two of them, you should get enough information to pull that off. We also have a Discord set up for people working on some settlements content, and you'll find out in the Builder's Toolkit how to get access to that Discord so that we can help you do that. So that should cover everything you can want to know about faction decorations. As always, I've started adding this little disclaimer at the end of my videos in this guide series. If you have any questions about this stuff, don't hesitate to ask. I'm happy to answer those or point you in the direction of the video that does answer them.